I'm joined today by Brian and Nick to talk about their fabulous new book, which I absolutely loved. But before we get into the details about the book, for people who were maybe not that familiar with Kenny Wheeler, what album would you both? It's a hard question, but what album would you recommend they would go in at if they're not too familiar with Kenny's work? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, yeah, no, after you, please. I mean, I'll just speak for my very, very favorite one is music for large and small ensembles, I would say.
Yeah,
Um, Only because, I mean, not only, but for many reasons, but the largest reason I think for me is because it showcases everything he could do, his writing, his playing, and his ability to put people together from lots of different worlds. And so
mm,
that is all showcased in that album. And there's so little of his big band writing available to hear. More and more is coming out, of course, thanks to Nick's
of
efforts,
course.
especially lately. But still, you can hear a lot of Kenny's small group writing. You hear a lot of his small group playing, a lot of his soloing. But his big band writing, which I think is so special and such a big part of who he was, is harder to find. And I think that's just, I mean, for me, that's a desert island disc. So
And to hear in your book, both of you, how that came about, that was just fascinating how it happened. Not knowing all this details is just, oh, this is just so great.
absolutely, yeah. Well, it's like anything else. The more you get to know about it, the more miraculous it sort of becomes.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Nick?
Well, I certainly second that vote for all of those reasons. But I suppose, especially today, we're doing this Zoom on the day that we've heard the news about Jack
That Jack.
DeJohnette's passing, that
Mm,
we'd have to say New High, which is the first ECM album for Kenny, June 1975, and just such an amazing bit of Jack DeJohnette and Dave
mm.
Holland, completely incredible. And then that whole secondary kind of story of the significance of it being Keith's last real outing, Keith
Excitement.
Jarrett's last
Yeah.
outing as a side person. So and just Kenny is absolutely remarkable on it, and it was so instrumental in kind of launching him globally in people's awarenesses,
Mm.
So New
That
High, I think.
that was certainly one for me, I think. While we're there talking about New High, what I find fascinating is I think was it the last time Keith was a sideman with
Yeah,
yeah,
we did look into this, and there's like a tiny handful of other appearances of maybe
the,
a single track here and there,
Right.
or a classical thing here and
is the
there.
right.
But it's without question the last sort of significant complete album as a side jazz pianist playing other people's compositions. No question about that.
Right, yeah. What I found fascinating was I my piano teacher was Les Chisnell. You might know Les.
I know
You might
Les
know
very
Les.
well, yeah.
And Bill Kinghorn. You might be familiar with Bill. You might have heard him through Nicky Isles, maybe. And
Yeah.
I remember I was obsessed with the Smatter. And the first time I played it for my teacher, Billy said, "Keith's not humming." He said to me,
Oh, yeah,
and it
interesting.
just, I went, "What do you mean, Billy?" He says, "He's not humming." He said, "I don't think I'm not sure he's happy with these changes." And obviously, as a young 20-year-old, I was like, "What's he talking about?" But in hindsight now, I wonder what your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I must
Like,
admit, I'd never spotted that the usual
yeah,
vocalizations are not there.
yeah,
There
and
are
no, they do
some.
come, they do
There's
come, but
some, are
initially,
there?
Yeah.
yeah, but initially they're a bit. There's not many early on. I just
I
wonder
mean,
what
I
you guys
think
thought about it.
a, a lot of the music on that record, perhaps not Smatter particularly, but a lot of it had quite fully notated piano parts, and I wonder whether in Keith's
Ah,
mind that vocalization thing is very much wedded to his improvising, and when he's reading, it's like a slightly different kind of bit of the brain or something,
yeah,
Well, and
But yeah,
he even said basically what Nick's saying to Ian Carr in Ian Carr's book. During that interview, he was talking about that session, and he said that the chords were so fully prescribed that it didn't give him room to kind of do what he was feeling. I think in some ways, and so he did feel maybe a bit handcuffed. by
Yeah.
that. I think that's according even to his own words. But yeah, I there is, as people can read about in the album, there was sort of a what did Manfred say to you, Nick? He said something about like there was a chill because the air condition was on full blast in the studio because it was a really hot day in
Yeah.
June, I think, that day, and he said it was a chilly atmosphere, not only outside but also in the studio.
Yeah, it was
So something
something
like
like
that,
that. Yeah.
in his kind of way of basically saying, there was a little bit of frost on Keith.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing about that observation of Keith's, and by the way, if it's of interest, we wrote to him for an interview, and he did reply, but he just said, "Look, I've said everything that I can say
Oh,
about
that's it.
that
Right. Okay.
to Ian Carr, so just use that."
Right. Okay. Yeah.
He didn't blow us off, but he just sort of said, "Look, I've said what there is." But
Yeah.
the interesting thing about that observation of the sort of vertical structures is that he's not wrong actually about Kenny does have this incredibly clear and quite fully articulated sort of vertical thing. And Dave Holland said that him and Jack made a distinct effort to play very sort of linearly to try and kind of break out for Keith's sake, to try and give Keith a sort of forward motion. But I mean, of course, he sounds incredible. It's not like he's restricted in any way, but
Exactly. Yeah.
it obviously was something he felt a bit.
Yeah. And is this just a folk story that Keith said to Manfred? It's just not my thing in the control room. Is that just an old wives' tale, or?
I think that's maybe become a bit apocryphal. That I've never heard it put like that.
Right.
That he said it's not my thing, but there were various stories about him opening the envelope in front of Kenny like he hadn't checked out the music. Didn't Kenny say that to you, Brian?
Well, yeah, I remember Kenny saying that he handed one of the tunes back to him and said, "I just can't do anything with
Yeah,
this."
he told me that too. That's why the album's so short, that there should have been another tune, and I don't know what it was, but he said, "I can't do anything with this." But I'm sure Kenny told some people that there was a thing about Jarrett opened the envelope of music, and everyone we've spoken to were like, "There's no way, he's too professional for that,"
Right.
and
Yeah.
too much respect for Manfred, for Dave Holland, Jack DeJohnette to have,
Yeah.
So I mean, Jack DeJohnette, God bless him, was very, I thought, measured about the whole Keith question on New High, wasn't he, to you, Brian? And he was like, "Look, basically, he wouldn't have done it if he didn't want to do it. Like
Exactly.
that's all
Yeah.
you need to know."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he said something about like, Keith also didn't like playing electronic instruments, but he did it for Miles,
Yeah.
because, and so he wouldn't have done it if he didn't want to do it. So his thing was basically if he didn't want to do it, he wouldn't have been there. So there was something in the music that kept him, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you think as players, that it is quite something like Smatter, for example, is quite a challenging tune to play because of, like you said, Nick, these angular kind of chord changes. I've always found it difficult when I first started to play it. I don't know what you chaps think.
I mean, I think it's a bit difficult for me that because I've played so much of that music. I don't, in a way, I don't find it difficult. It's so familiar, and so just. I mean, don't get me wrong. I sound terrible on all of it, but I find it all equally. No, I think a smatter of all of them because it's basically 2 bars per chord is a bit more easy and modal. Some of them are much gnarlier than that,
Yeah, and
Heyoki, for instance.
Oof, yeah.
well, yeah, especially not only just that first part of Heyoki, which is basically that waltz tune,
Yeah.
but then the second part, which is what he made into the big band arrangement, that has really actually, it looks like a piece of classical music, where there's the melody on top, and then there's just really clearly written, not only chords, but rhythms too underneath. And they're huge chords, they're like from under the bass clef staff all the way up into the treble clef staff. And, I mean, I think that might have been probably the most prescribed thing, and part of it's because you can't, some of those harmonies you can't really describe with normal jazz-based nomenclature.
No.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a way you can make
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
massive slash chord out of it or something
Yeah,
like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's pretty, some of it's pretty out there, especially for 1975 or when he wrote it,
Yeah.
probably 73, 74. I don't know, but those things I think are probably the most thickly walled, shall we
yeah,
say,
yeah.
of
Yeah.
all of the tunes on that album, at least. Yeah,
Fascinating. I could probably talk about New Eye for an hour, but just
let's do it.
fascinating. So when did you both individually first hear Kenny's music, and what album was it? I don't know who wants to go first. I'm really be fascinated.
Well, while we're talking about New High, for me it was New High,
Ah, okay.
and I was a lowly freshman, first year student at Eastern Illinois University, in which is a small town, not a huge music school, but a really great jazz pianist who was on faculty there named Mark Maglin, who was far more open-minded than a lot of the faculty, especially in that area. He had a jazz piano class, and in that jazz piano class, he had a seminar, and it was a Keith Jarrett seminar. So I actually heard Kenny through going to this Keith Jarrett seminar as a trumpet player. You know, some friends of mine were like, "You should come to this. You might dig it." And I was like, "Okay, who's this guy?" And when I heard, and Smatter was the first thing he played, and I heard that descending interval. I've told Nick this 1,000 times,
Oh yeah.
uh, but hearing that descending interval and how beautifully Kenny played it and how it fits
Mm.
over the harmony, you know, it lands on the minor 11th of this chord, and it's like
Oh yeah.
there's something so like emotional about that, even though as a theory nerd I could also appreciate the complexity of it, you know. And
Mm,
so he was marrying this soulful thing with something that was harmonically really sophisticated, and that just completely blew my mind.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it was someone I guess you'll know, Paul, is Richard Isles.
I do know Richard very well. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Richard was my teacher while I was at Salford College
Ah, right. Okay.
in the mid 90s, I guess, 96, something like that, 95. And he said, "Have you heard of Kenny Wheeler?" And I think I thought it was a trad player. Because everyone who was a trad player seemed to be called Kenny. There was like Kenny Baker, Kenny Ball, and I mean, I was so naive, an idiot. And so it was like, I think, yeah, maybe, I think so, And then he gave me a couple of cassettes back then, and one of the first was Flutter by Butterfly, were I allowed another Desert Island disc, that's a
Yeah.
huge one for me. And yeah, just I feel like my reaction, it seems like riskily cliched to draw the parallel, but it feels to me like my reaction to hearing Kenny was a little like Kenny's reaction with hearing Book a Little, that I just felt a bit lost, and then
Yeah.
you heard this thing that was like, oh, I can relate to, like it somehow, to use his words about Book a Little, is like, oh, there is another way, kind of thing, that you can play this music. I think it's a separate conversation, but I think that can also be a trap for a lot of young jazz students, that you can get pulled down this thing for something that's incredibly personalized and kind of has its own unique story. But for me, it came about that way, and it was entirely due to Richard.
And then did you both kind of dive in at that point then? Were you both sort of, was it a bit of an
Yeah,
obsession then for both of you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's funny because the next summer I got a job, my first real professional job on a cruise ship. Uh, you know, and so I show up and there are a bunch of Canadians in the band on the cruise ship, and they had all just been to Banff and studied with Kenny. And we're sitting at the bar, the crew bar, which is what you do when you work on a cruise ship, and, and talking to each other. And I said, they were like, "Well, who are you into?" And I said, "Well, I just heard this guy named Kenny Wheeler." They're like, "Oh yeah, we just studied with him up at Banff." And I was like, what? You could actually go study with this guy, this sort of mythical, English I thought at that point he was English. I didn't even know he was Canadian by birth. And so they said, yeah, he's probably teaching there next year. You should sign up for it. And so I did. This was 1998, and it happened to be Kenny's last year teaching at Banff. So, if I hadn't,
Wow, yeah.
it's like so many things in life where if this hadn't happened and this hadn't happened, things would have gone in a completely different direction. And so, yeah, I finally got to meet him there, and it
Wow.
was an incredible experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky. He came to the college a few times
Yeah.
with John Taylor, when I was a student. So, and that Norma Winston was there. It was fabulous.
Yeah.
A real joy. And then I actually saw him do Angel Song at the Irish Centre, a very bizarre venue in Leeds. Yeah, I don't know if you know it, Nick, but it
I
was
do. Yeah.
where
What
Pat
with
Metheny would play and all this in this Irish Centre club. This it's like working men's
and it
club
was with
essential.
Bill, was it? With Frizzell and Lee
I
Konitz.
don't think Frizzell did it.
Abercrombie did one
He
of
did
those
it.
tours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I saw that at the Barbican too. Yeah.
But Bill Frizzell did that one, did he?
He did one, but there was a second one without that was with
Ah, was
John.
there? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. That
Yeah.
sounds.
Amazing.
Yeah,
But I
amazing.
mean, getting into Kenny when you lived in the UK was a slightly different thing compared to what Brian would have experienced because he was here.
Yeah.
He was there, and I went to do the like so many people did back then. There were much fewer jazz courses, and the route into London for people who'd been at Leeds and people who were at Salford was to go and do that 1 year postgrad diploma at the Guildhall.
Yeah.
And John Taylor would come and take a small band. Stan Saltzman was there a lot. Pete Churchill was beginning to work with Kenny a bit on some of the vocal things, and so he suddenly didn't feel like it was that distant.
Yeah. Fascinating.
So
Fascinating.
I met him and heard him in around that time eventually.
Yeah, because when I was a student at the college, Tony Faulkner, I'm sure you might
Yeah,
both be
of
familiar
course.
with
Yeah.
that. There was remember this album?
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, you might be able to speak to a bit more about this to me, but I remember Tony said to me, I'm going to conduct Kenny Wheeler and this. And I said, can I come?
Yeah.
And Nick said, sorry, and Tony said, no, you freaking can't. And he didn't say freaking. And I didn't know, independently of me, the other pianist, which you probably know, Matthew Bourne had also asked. Matt Bourne had asked if he could go, and he got the same response.
Ah. What to
Yeah.
the recording session?
Yeah, so I
you
said,
mean?
could I come to the recording session? And obviously he told me no.
Wow.
And then afterwards I asked him, and he said it was just, he didn't have to do much. But I don't know what you chaps know about that recording session.
I guess more than most. But
Was,
it's not.
was it not an ECM release? Was it something separate, and then did ECM take it on?
Yeah, it was one of the few that was handed to ECM afterwards, and they agreed to do it. But yeah, it's quite complicated. It's definitely one for the book
Yeah, great. Yeah,
to direct people to. Take a long time to go into it now, but it was music that he'd done at the NDR with the brass section
I
of
remember now in your book. Yes,
of that, and then they did it as kind of a. You remember that absolutely wonderful creative jazz orchestra and all of the amazing projects they used to do. And Nick Purnell, I hope. We've not talked to him since the book came out, but I hope he feels he was duly acknowledged because he did so much for Kenny, and and this album came out of that connection. But then I think they did one version that they then re-recorded with a slightly different group, and
I remember that from the book. Yeah. Anything else to add with that, Brian?
No, I think Nick's covered it. It is really complicated, and it's been a little while since we wrote that chapter.
It's a while since I read the book,
I
but I
will
remember at the
trust,
time thinking, wow.
yeah,
yeah,
I will remember, or I'll trust Nick's memory of that. Yeah.
And so can we talk a little bit about the relationship with John Taylor?
yeah, of course, yeah.
I don't know if you're ever going to write a book about John Taylor. That would be great.
We won't be writing another book about anyone.
Yeah. So this is our first and last book, as Nick has said many times. Yes.
No
Might
more.
write Brian's biography one day.
Yeah. So yeah, they had such a strong simpatico, didn't they? Such a connection together.
Yeah, that was
Um,
a hugely close and deep connection, and so tragic that John, I think of all the awful kind of losses that we had over the 10 years of writing the book, that suddenly, like, Lee Konitz went during COVID, and all of the rest of them. John, without question, was one of the biggest ones that just at every single turn it was like, oh God, if only we could have asked John about this, or checked if he felt this was accurate, or because I did an interview with him in April 2015,
right?
I guess. I'm surprised it was that late though, because I think what happened was we started writing this book in the summer 2014,
Right.
and didn't we prioritize like the older people straight away, like had to get to Duncan Lamont like the next week, I think. And he lasted ages.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was a good decision, statistically. It just, it was just such a sad and unexpected loss.
Yeah, so John, I spoke to, and we finished the interview, right, okay, we'll speak very soon, because we're going to need a lot from you on this, and then bang.
Wow.
But I think it's important to understand just what a big influence John was on Kenny as well, like his writing and all of that. Where you listen to that sextet from the 70s, Pause and Think Again, and that group, it's absolutely incredible, and the writing is incredible, and some of the writing in Azimuth is absolutely unbelievable. It's important to remember what a big figure it influenced both ways.
Yeah, I remember actually that. So did John die? Was it 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah. The pianist Matthew Bourne, we found that John was playing a solo concert in New York, so Matt said we should go. So I was like, yeah, we have to go. And then after the concert finished, Matt was like, come on, let's go backstage and talk to. And I was like, oh, let's leave it now, come on. And he's like, no, let's go. And I'm so glad we did, because I think it was a week later he died on stage where he was in Europe. I'm just so glad that we got to spend some time with him,
Wow.
Yeah. So, such a great, one of the great jazz pianists,
Oh, without doubt.
without question.
And in my experience, and I'm sure Brian feels the same, that over the course of this project and with talking to different musicians and things, you realise that Kenny is so much more than just a British jazz figure, and I say that with absolutely no diminishing or disrespect of the people who are amazing British figures in British jazz history, but he was just much more international. Like that work with Anthony Braxton, Dave Holland's quintet, the whole ECM thing, recording for Abercrombie, Bill Frisell, Steve Coleman. It was all, he just is a much more international figure. And you realise also that John Taylor, Norma Winston, Evan Parker, that these also are people that are truly sort of significant globally, and John especially is in that much kind of more rarefied group.
Yeah. And Kenny even told us, or maybe it was in a different interview. It's all kind of blending together, but he spoke about John being his favorite musician.
Yeah.
Mm.
And to have all the range of people that Kenny could have chosen for that honorific.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot about his respect for John.
Yeah, I think that might have even been one of the young musicians on the Saturday school at the Junior Academy.
Oh, right. Yeah,
I think it was a kid who asked, like, who's your favourite person you've ever played with? And of course they're thinking, Brecker, Jack DeJohnette, whatever.
Yeah.
And he really thought about it and was like, I have to say John Taylor, he's just amazing.
Well, I absolutely love them. I'm sure you guys do. I love the duo albums on Cam Jazz,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I heard them do a duo concert once in Manchester at the International Trumpet Guild Conference, which was kind of a weird thing actually our Eastman Trumpet Quartet got to open for their concert, which was really cool and a huge honor. And Kenny wrote a 4-trumpet piece for that occasion, so we came out and played like a 9-minute piece that had little bits to feature everyone, and then John Taylor and Kenny came out and played a duo concert, and a lot of the trumpet players, were expecting higher, faster, and louder, and they come and hear this harmonically sophisticated, sort of duo intimate setting, and I think some people didn't know what to think of it at first because they probably had never heard of him before, or if they had, they knew something that wasn't, and so it took a little while for that concert to ignite with the audience, but I think by the end people were on their feet, which was beautiful. But it was great to hear them together too. This would have been in Manchester at the Royal Northern College, I think. Yeah.
So when did so did you say it was 10 years ago or over 10 years ago? Did you have the idea of the book? Who instigated the idea of the book?
It's his fault. I can if you screen share, I can show you the email. No, what happened was I think one important thing to say, if people don't know, is we both knew Kenny really pretty well, and I guess by the nature of being in London, I was particularly close to him by the sort of mid 2000s right through to his death, and ended up almost sort of looking after the bookings and eventually getting the archive. So we were very, very close. This is not an academic kind of scholastic piece of work.
No, it's certainly not. It's a wonderful read, chaps. It's a great read. It's so insightful,
Yeah, I'm glad it comes over that way. And basically, I was beginning to do more and more sort of talks at colleges playing his music and things, and some people would say, hey, you should write his book, have you ever thought about this? And independently, me and Brian hadn't met yet, but I think he perhaps had thought the same thing. Maybe people had said, hey, what, have you thought about doing this? And we both were like, no, we're trumpet players and teachers, it should be done by a proper author. But the thought was kind of planted, and then Brian and I met in 2011 through Kenny in New York at that Festival of New Trumpet Music that me and Mark Wheeler, Kenny's son, helped put together with Dave Douglas.
Yeah.
And then we did an exhibition of Kenny's life in the museum at the Academy, and that was basically a walk-through biography of. And Brian was involved in that. He came to do a talk. He did a transcription, or we used a transcription he'd done of something. And so it was like the kind of universe was pointing us in the direction of doing this. And in the end, the email I'm joking about is it is a true story. That it was July 2014. And Brian wrote to me, and we were friends by this point, and he said, look, I've got a sabbatical coming up. I'm gonna have a go at writing this biography. I can't do it without you. Are you in or not? And at that point it was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. And thank God we did.
Yeah. Anything to add, Brian?
Oh, well, I think Nick is really blaming me for this whole situation, I'm not really that comfortable with it. No, I mean, I do remember us talking about it before that, though. I think it was you were taking me back to the airport after the exhibition. I think I had come to see the exhibition, if I'm remembering right. And I said, man, I mean, because, Kenny's health was not great at that point. And he had, various issues here and there. And, he was, 83 at that point. I mean, he wasn't going to live forever, obviously. And we knew that his health was probably not going to make some massive rebounds. It was like, if we don't do this now, we're going to lose out on the opportunity to talk to him. And luckily, Nick had interviewed him already about, several times for things for Font and for other projects that you had worked on together. And so the ball was sort of already rolling. We just kind of had to jump on it and decide that we were going to do that together.
And he was kind of shocked, wasn't he? Because he's so humble that you wanted to write. Did you? Because you mentioned to him, didn't you, about writing?
Oh yeah, he knew we were doing it, and I got back. Well, I was in South Africa when Brian wrote to me, and so I got back that summer and went to see him in the care home, and I said, look, Brian and I are gonna do this? Is that okay? And are you happy about it? And he sort of joked of like, well, yeah, I don't know who's going to want to read it. And but he did say, I swear to God, he said, I'm happy it's you two doing it, and that meant a huge amount, you know. But I
Yeah.
think the other thing, Brian, if you agree with this, that we also would see a few more kind of academic theses coming out about his music and things, and they were perfectly brilliantly written and accurate about the harmony, but they lacked the sort of closeness of the human relationship with him and with his sort of circle. And I think we
Yes.
began to think, oh, it would be horrible if it was done by someone completely from the outside. We'd feel uncomfortable with that. So in the end, we went for it.
One of the highlights for me was getting to a bit where I thought you'd talk. Yeah, I knew you would. You talk about Mr. Ben because I used to
Oh
love
yeah,
Mr. Ben.
yeah,
And in fact, I remember about 10 years ago getting the DVD for my son, as a teenager now.
excellent.
And he loved that when he was like, so that's Kenny Wheeler.
Yeah, yeah,
But even, and all those stories about the sessions around there, I found that completely fascinating.
yeah.
It's amazing how many sessions he was doing. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, amazing. I love all the Tony Fisher, great session trumpet player, studio trumpet player. All his memories were just so
Yeah.
fantastic about that. They're in the book, but yeah, wonderful stories. You know, really interesting sort of insights about what if you showed up at the studio and Kenny was there. You're like, huh, I wonder what we're doing today. Then,
Yeah.
because like someone knows what they're talking about if that guy's here. You know,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
so interesting that he came to represent that sort of his presence alone, represented something.
And you mentioned in the book, I won't spoil it, it's in the book about him thinking that one session was a bit of a joke, wasn't it? So he didn't bother going, did he, until later on in the day or something? I
Well,
remember you.
that was Mr. Ben.
That was Mr.
Yeah.
Ben, right? It was Mr. Ben, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he said, "Oh, I thought you were joking." That's why there's no trumpet on about 3 of the episodes or something.
Ah, right. Okay. And we're running a little short of time, so I just want. How did you write a chapter each, or did you send each other, and how did that work?
Yeah, we basically did. We divided the book up early on and said, okay, I feel like more comfortable with this, and also, because of Nick's connection with the later part of his life, he
Mm.
sort of took on those things in a big way because he was there.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
great
yeah.
to have that resource. And since I was in North America, and I could go to Canada a little bit more easily than Nick could. I got to interview a lot of Kenny's family and some of his childhood friends too. And so I took on the primary responsibilities for the early chapters. But then what we would do was hand the work off to one another and edit it. So I would edit Nick's writing and Nick would edit my writing. And then, if there was something we disagreed with or was like, I don't think you've got this quite right. There wasn't much of that, but I would have thought this or I feel this way about it. And we would come to some sort of, it wasn't like a compromise. It would to me it was more like we would talk through the issue
Mm.
and both of us would understand it better because we had talked about, something we either one of us had an understanding about something that the other one didn't, or one of us had a perspective about it that it was usually Nick having perspective that I didn't have. But
Mm.
still, for me, I thought it was, we didn't really know how to do this. So
Mm.
that's how we figured out to do it. And I think it
Mm.
came off pretty well. And people have said that, it's hard to tell, one person's writing
I,
from the
I,
other. That's
you
that's
can't
the
tell.
biggest
You wouldn't
compliment
be
I
able to
think.
tell at all. No.
No, but
Good.
it was. I think we were lucky in a way. I don't know if luck's the right word, but we benefited from just how long it took because we really kind of edited each other's chapters like a lot, and then back and forward a bit with Alan Shipton too, who's the series editor.
Yeah.
So by the time we'd done that, it's been completely sort of unified in terms of the voice.
Mm.
So yeah, we it was definitely divide and conquer.
Mm. Well, I could talk to you for ages about this. It's so wonderful. Thanks for, sparing some time to talk about it. Where's a good place for people to get the book? Is it available on all the
Well,
online stores and things?
yeah, I think, but probably the ethical route would be direct from the publisher would be best, which is Equinox Publishing, and you can order direct from them. But yeah, other online retailers are available. But but yeah, I think probably from direct from Equinox would be great. And there's an ebook and all of that.
Ah, I'm
Yeah,
going to ask.
And
Brilliant.
just to say something about Equinox too, because they, obviously jazz publishing is a niche market, and I think buying directly from them benefits them, and they had the courage to really put some energy behind what we're doing, and so we'd like
yeah.
to give that
Yeah.
back in some way.
Well, it's fabulous. I can't recommend it enough, and I just want to thank you both for your time.
Well, thank you very much for having us. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
I found that photo. I sent it to Brian. Of that was me posting the envelope with the original contract in. It was 11 years ago
Wow,
last week,
amazing.
and when we sent that contract, the original submission for the book was December 2016. So they've been very patient with us
Yes,
to
they were.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, brilliant, chaps. Thanks so much.
Yeah, well, thank you, Paul, and great to speak and share all this. So thanks
yeah,
for having us.
yeah. Thank you, Paul. It's great to meet you.
Thank you.